My name is Zulu. I'm the Discourse. I'd just like to thank the Cass and FVZS Discourse for their sponsorship and to make this event possible. So our speaker today is a published author, artist, poet, and motivational speaker. He lectured at the University of KwaZulu-Natal before moving to the corporate world. In 1995, unfortunately, he was involved in a car accident which put him in a wheelchair. Applying his personal philosophy of embracing change, he not only found a way to cope with his new life, but to inspire others as well. He's the author of 3 books, and some of his awards include Entrepreneur of the Year and the Platinum Award at the Black Business Quarterly. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Musa E. Zulu.
Thank you very much for a beautiful introduction, and thank you very much for a beautiful invitation. As he says, my name is Musa Zulu, and I guess I'm here today to pay you a visit. I'm happy to be here, especially because this year is very special to me. I was paralyzed on the 20th of April 1995, which means on the 20th of April this year I'm going to be celebrating 21 years in a wheelchair. And I guess every one of us knows that at 21, that's when you feel like you are at the beginning of your life. And I guess I'm going to be celebrating this year as exactly that, the beginnings of my continuity. What have I learned in the 21 years in the wheelchair? I've learned a couple of lessons that I always share with my audiences around South Africa and other countries. And the first lesson that I've come to learn and really come to embrace is the fact that the language we use in defining ourselves becomes the language that other people will always copy and use in defining us. I was never one to define myself in the negative. I know that it's called a disability, but anything that starts, and most of the things that start with the letters DIS are always in the negative. Disliked, disempowered, disenfranchised. You speak English better than myself. Dishonest, discomfort. If a girlfriend drops you, you are dissed. If you fall from your wheelchair, suddenly you have dismounted. Anything with a DIS, I've always approached with caution. And I guess people with disabilities owe it to themselves first to say, are we really being defined as who we believe we should be defined as? And it begins with the terminology that society uses to define who you are. Disabled. What is a disability? If I may ask it, what exactly is a disability? Incapability. I mean, at the end of the day, anything disabled is something completely out of capacity. Capacity to do, capacity to be, capacity to even self-define. I've always believed that mine is this ability. I remember in 2004 when I was writing my autobiography, The Language of Me, that I coined the term this ability. What is this ability? This ability is the power of the soul to push itself beyond limits. And trust me when I say, your students with disabilities, as society defines them, wake up every single day to push themselves beyond limits. And I don't think that a person capable of doing that should really be defined in the negative. And of course, there are many other examples of people that are so-called disabled that have demonstrated to the world that with reaching deeper into their souls and sourcing that power, they literally change the world. A few examples. Teddy Pendergrass, paralyzed at the height of his career, but went on, only died in 2010, to literally beat his previous records of hits. when he was still walking. Ray Charles, could you really say the man was disabled or blind when he started touching that keyboard or singing those lines? Andrea Bocelli. How many of us, when Andrea sings, literally start seeing the pictures of life much better than before he starts belting out in tenor? Musa E, Zulu. The moment I open my mouth or even connect pen and paper as an artist, as an author, or open my mouth to start allowing words to flow out, it's ability that shines through. How then am I defined as disabled? Have we literally come to create a world of people that we have defined as such, and they've also come to adopt that definition to a point where they disempower themselves? I think we have. And I've never wanted to live by that philosophy. Mine is this ability, the power to push myself beyond all limits. But this ability is not necessarily the opposite of disabilities, but an acknowledgement of the fact that our natural disabilities are neither prisons nor closed gates, but open possibilities where, if we wish to step through, we can be. But how do we achieve this level of this ability versus disability? I believe that the second lesson that I've learned is never to accept, but to always embrace. I visit newly disabled, if I may use that term, people in hospitals around KwaZulu-Natal and all over South Africa. And I'm always amazed when they boldly say to me, I've accepted what happened. People that accept take things as they come and never shape them in any way whatsoever. It has been given to me. What more can I do about it? People that accept adopt, but people that embrace take things as they come and they shape them such that they work for them or for themselves. People that embrace adapt. I said people that accept adopt, and I was never one to adopt, especially circumstances, because in adopting we literally lock ourselves in a conservative prison where things always stay the same. So lesson number 2 that I've learned in these 21 years that I've spent in the wheelchair is never to accept things as they come, but to embrace them such that at the end of the day they become exactly what I want them to be. Are you still with me? What else have I learned? I've also learned the power of discipline. The basic definition of discipline is self-awareness. A disciplined person is self-aware than one that is not. And in learning the principles of discipline and even applying them, I've not only come to understand exactly who I am, but also the power of my potentials. Number 2, or number 5 if you want to call it, what was it? Lesson number 1 was this ability. It's 4. Please count with me. I was never very good with mathematics. In fact, if I may just get away from this one to tell you about mathematics, I still hold a record. I believe it's a South African record. In matric, I received 16 out of 400, which translated to 4%. And I remember my father looking at my report and saying, I guess he's an artist. They must have given him a few marks for at least underlining. So if I start mixing numbers, forgive me, I'm very bad with numbers. I've also learned to appreciate the fact that in taking the initiative, I can achieve. What is to take the initiative? To take the initiative is not to try, but to do. To take the initiative, that's my definition of taking the initiative. Go to the library, not to the library, to the dictionary, maybe it will give you another definition. But in as far as I'm concerned, taking the initiative simply means doing and not trying to. Many people will say something like, I do not understand why I was not given a promotion or why I was not given the opportunity when I tried so much. People that try only achieve one thing: attempts. And attempts are not results, but people that do achieve results. And that's the philosophy by which I've lived my life. To always do and not to always try. And people that always say, I tried, are always full of excuses. And unfortunately, most people, the so-called people with disabilities, are very good at utilizing those words. Tried. Why has the situation of people with disabilities not changed in South Africa today after all of these laws and acts and policies have been put into place? Go and ask the disabled sector, they'll tell you. It's because we always try to be heard, but they never listen to us. Who is going to be listening to attempts? Do, and people are going to follow your movements. I've also learned the power of leadership. Self-leadership. I'm not talking about the leadership in a community hall or your leaders that always come late. I'm talking about self-leadership. The ability to show the way by going in first. I remember when the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal in 2010 said, what can we possibly do for people with disabilities? Because every time we open opportunities, they're not the first ones to take them. And I saw opportunity in that statement. And I said to him, well, let me demonstrate the way by going in first. I'll tell you what I'm going to do, and you are going to assist me. Because you have already used that statement that whenever opportunities are given, whenever around to start, what do you call this thing, harnessing them. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to join with a group of friends, very good friends of mine. All of them are in wheelchairs. And we're going to establish a trust. The government of KwaZulu-Natal is going to assist us in this trust. We are going to be coming through and saying, here are children that we have identified in special schools that want to go to university and qualify to go to university, and they are going to give us bursaries for those. Hello to you. Yeah. If I had a tape, I would rewind. Yes, I said we're going to establish a trust that is going to see to their educational needs. And we do not want to be giving them bursaries to go to some obscure college, because that's where they always think that we best qualify to go to. We're going to be taking them to universities in KwaZulu-Natal. We registered it in 2011 in the Zulu Trust. How does the name come about? Because the best friend with whom I started the trust, his surname is Ndimeni, and mine is Zulu. And if you combine those surnames, Ndime Zulu, it literally forms a word. Indime Zulu literally translates into a wide field. Indima in Zulu is a field where people plow and throw in seeds for growth. Zulu means wide. So a wide field where we want to sow seeds of what we call this thing of empowerment, educational empowerment. Just in 2015, we registered our 15th graduate. 15th graduate. And if I may give you a breakdown of these graduates, undergraduates 10, 2 at honors level, 3 at master's level. There's leadership that people with disabilities need to learn in order to take themselves forward. I then said to the Premier of the province, I'm not finished with you. You always celebrate the month of August here and gather all of these women from all over to celebrate them as the heroines of our times. You have never had a program that specifically looks at celebrating not only the potential but the excellence or the excellent achievements of women with disabilities. We started with the Tributes Excellence Awards in 2010. And I said to him, because you have thrown me a challenge, I'm going to take it further. I'm not talking about a gala dinner here where they are going to come for one night. You sing songs for them, sing their praises, and the following day they are gone. I need a 3-day event where they are going to be, and mind you, 13 categories where the public nominates these women. 13. And I said to him, forget about awards that are going to be provincial. I'm talking about national awards here. So these women are nominated from all over South Africa. And they jet into KwaZulu-Natal. The first day, when they come into the province, they are whisked away to the city hall, where the mayor of the hosting town welcomes them with a breakfast. And other women with disabilities that are local also come to participate to celebrate their own. The second day and the third day, we allocate to a disability expo, where different organizations for people with disabilities, 40 per year, are always identified to come and exhibit here, so that a child with a disability does not only come to say wow to their heroines, but also gets to access opportunities that are available in society. On the third day at night is the awards, and at the awards ceremony, that's where they are presented with the tribute statuette. If you want to look at all of these things that I'm talking about, www.valhallaarts.co.za, all of it is there. Why am I telling you all of this? Because all of that is what I refer to as the ability to lead. What else have I learned? The fact that in doing all of what I've spoken about, we do not only come to self-define or to define ourselves as members of a society that are capable of going beyond the stereotype, but also as members of a society that are enjoying themselves and are registering a mark that we can always look back to and say, wow, I've come so far. Are there any questions? So when I'm talking about celebrating 21 years in this wheelchair, on the 20th of April, I'm going to be relaunching my website as a new look Musa E Zulu website. All of these are going to be there, plus more.
Christian, so I think, thank you for sharing your story. I'm quite interested, so some people are born with a disability and others might become disabled as a consequence of an accident or the progression of a genetic disorder, etc. And your story maybe falls in the latter. So you were able-bodied before and then your life changed significantly, and for some people they might think that it changed negatively, and I think from your story it's inspiring because I don't think it went downhill. On the contrary, I think it took a it was a catalyst for greater things. So I want to know from you, how did you sort of manage that experience from being able-bodied to then being disabled, and how people close to you responded to this significant change in how you are able to navigate society, because infrastructurally you are able to do a lot of things, and we know that our buildings and our towns and our cities are not necessarily very disabled friendly. So how did you sort of come to adjust and overcome those challenges with people close to you and in your circle?
You need to understand one thing, that your nature also determines if people are going to gravitate towards you or people are going to scatter with the wind. I've always been a very positive person. I take things as they come, embrace them the best way that I can, and share the lessons with others around me freely. And people will always gravitate towards that, because people, number one, will want to sympathize, but before they know it, they see, no, this is not a what we call it, a symbol of pity. This is actually a lesson, because it could come to anybody, and then they'll sit down and they'll listen. I'm also an opportunist. That's the other thing about me, and I pride myself as an opportunist. When opportunity presents itself to me, I will exhaust it to the best of my potential. Let me tell you something. I love shoes. I do. My collection of shoes is stuff of legend. And when the wheelchair came, it presented me with an opportunity that they are never going to get old. They are always going to be there. I could literally go into a shop today, and just as you do when you go and sell a car, put the other one as a, what do you call it? What do they call it? As a trade-in. I look at life in ways that other people would think border on crazy. But I remember literally sitting up one day in hospital and thinking, wow, what an opportunity. My shoes are never going to get old. And that way of looking at life does not only just limit itself to those pairs of shoes. When the Premier said there is nothing that people with disabilities do, I suddenly found an opportunity to say something to him and knew that he was never going to say no to anything that I was going to be proposing, because he had already thrown the ball to my court to say, what do you want to do? I will support you with that. What type of a life does a person like that live? An open life. Because every corner is going to present a chance to redefine myself or find myself in that situation. I mean, honestly, what story would I have been able to tell if I had not been involved in a car accident? I honestly do not know. But all I know is that I never had anything that drove me towards picking up the pen to write a story about myself. But when disability or my paralysis came to be, I looked at it as an opportunity to tell a new story about the things that I could still do that people thought were never going to be possible to do. Or new things that I would have wanted, or that I then wanted to do, to prove a point to myself that I was still alive and kicking. Of course, not kicking because I'm paraplegic, but still alive and a part of these planes. And an opportunity to even study this sector. Because trust me, when I say to you, if today you were to commit yourself to studying people with disabilities, if you want to call it that, very closely, you'll be amazed. There is a lady, I was still at university. Her name is Lois Strachan. I was still working then, 1990 I believe so. I'm sat at the cafeteria and suddenly Lonely is the Night by S-Supply. Do you know S-Supply? But you are very young, son, to know S-Supply. S-Supply is a music group from Australia. They now live in Los Angeles. A duo, Russell Hitchcock and Graham Russell. I love their music, always loved their music. I grew up in a family that loves music. We're encouraged not only just to listen to the songs, but to get to know the personalities behind the songs, from the musicians to the producers, countries and everything. So music is a part of me. Lonely is the Night plays on the screens, and I quickly go up to the university, what do you call it, music? A studio, music studio, call it that. It's not a recording studio because nobody recorded there, but like a radio station. Could I please see that album? And the guy behind the vinyl says, there we are. And I say, any possibilities of loaning this album? I'll return it tomorrow. He says, well, you can talk to the owner. And the owner is a young, beautiful white lady at the corner. I'm black. Is she going to trust me with her album? S-Supply for that matter. So I go to her and I say, please. And the lady flatly refuses. She says, no. It's an import. You just cannot have it. So I say to her, what other S-Supply? She says, I love S-Supply and I'm not going to be giving this album to anybody. So I say to her, what other albums by S-Supply do you have? She says, no, I don't have any other. I say, you don't have any other? And you say you love S-Supply. Could you do this for me? This favor? Could you do me this favor? Please be here tomorrow. I'm going to give you 7 albums by S-Supply. If you just promise that you are going to take them home to play them, you can tape them if you want to. But please bring them back with Lonely is the Night, Hearts in Motion. Says, oh, well, you know, when white people say, well, it means you have won me over. See what you do. I come back the following day with those 7 albums. I say, here we are. And he says, okay. And still does not give me an album, but she has 7 of mine. She doesn't give me an album. Now listen to this story. Exactly 2 days later, a friend of mine who was with me at the, what they call it, radio station, comes and says, hey Musa, that white lady is looking for you. And she doesn't seem fine at all. So I go out looking for this lady and I find her. And she's in tears. And she says to me, I don't even know where to start. I don't even know where to begin, Mr. Zulu. But I left the LPs on the car's dashboard. And the sun has scorched 2 of your albums. I see an opportunity. I'm not going to be crying foul here. Well, if it has happened, please bring back my albums and bring me that Lonely is the Night. So she gives me the album as a gift to create peace. This is in 1990. In 1994, I see Lois. Someone is holding her by the hand, and Lois is using your walking, what do you call it? Lois has developed an eye condition, and Lois is blind. I looked at her. I wished I could come closer and say, hey, do you remember? I was completely shattered. The following year I was paralyzed. And for some strange reason, her resilience on the day when I saw her, with tears streaming down her face, and the person that teaches you how to use the stick would be a what? A mobility instructor. A few weeks later, I saw her and she was doing it all by herself. A year later, I was paralyzed, and it never left my mind that that woman lost sight but still went back to university to try and find herself in that terrain that is scary even to a person that can see. Number 1 with a mobility instructor, and number 2 on her own. Now listen to how mighty life can be. Last year, I sit down with all public nominations and the judging panel for tributes. They've already shortlisted the 13 women, or they've shortlisted 3 per category. And in the category of education and literature, it's Lois Strachan. 20 years later, in fact 21 years later, I sat down with the judging panel and I said, could you do me this favor? I'm founder of tributes. And at the end of the day, the constitution of the award says, I also can always choose those that I think are going to make the awards even stronger. I said, this one definitely. And I'm phoning her tonight to say she has been chosen. I picked up the phone and I said, Lois, how are you? She says, I'm fine. I say, my name is Musa Zulu. She says, yes. I say, I'm founder of tributes. You are going to be receiving an award in the education category. She screams with joy. And I say, Lois, number 2, we've met before. I do not know if you still recall. She says, when did we meet? I simply said, Lonely is the Night. And she knew exactly who I was. That's being an opportunist, sir. That's exactly how I live my life. I take it to exactly where I'm going to be celebrating not only the present, but sometimes the past. But that's not a skill that you can only acquire because you once walked and were then disabled. Every single person that you call disabled has that inherent capacity to do just that, to seize the opportunity and make it work for themselves. Ask this lady here, ask that man over there. They are here today because they've done exactly that, seizing opportunity.
It appears to me that having a disability is very expensive. If you look at, you need to have tailor-made rooms, bathrooms. Sometimes you need wheelchairs and so on. Of which sometimes
expensive.
Yeah, in terms of the cost. For instance, if you want an electric wheelchair, it can sometimes cost more than 20,000.
Then what do you say to a person that says they want an X6 BMW instead of a 3 Series?
No, what I'm trying to get at is, do you think there can be anything that can be done to assist people with disability in terms of acquiring, because for them it's their necessity, it's not even a luxury, of which a car will be an option for a person, whereas a wheelchair, for instance, will be a necessity for a person who's in a wheelchair. But then sometimes we find that some of them they depend on grants and so on. So do you think there can be something that can be done either by the private sector or the government to assist in that regard? Because for them it's a necessity, it's not a choice that they can live
But
with.
you're asking that question as though nothing is happening. In the 21 years that I've lived in a wheelchair, so much has happened in this country and the world to meet people with disabilities halfway.
Do you have some examples that you can cite in that regard?
Employment Equity Act, ramps all over, books turned into braille, a lot. It's a matter of normalizing society such that every single person can access opportunity.
Is there a way perhaps that we can normalize a society?
But society is already normalizing itself. It's a matter of us seeing how we can piggyback on those changes and make it a point that they are accessed by a wider population.
Okay.
Sorry. I just want to come to that because I think when the question is posed, I start thinking about the whole idea of, it's not an idea anymore, it's about implementing universal access so that you create spaces, you make spaces, you build buildings, you have information in such a format that it's accessible to most users. So in other words, when I listen to you, you were saying at the beginning around disability, almost taking disability out of the equation, that if you design in such a way that your building doesn't have to be retrofitted, like you say, you've got the cost of a ramp and all of that. If you design your building and the building is more than one floor, that it's designed in a way that it is accessible to most users. So whether you are temporarily injured and you're on crutches, or whether you are an older person, or you develop a medical condition, or you're in a wheelchair, so that it is inaccessible, so you shouldn't have to retrofit. I think the whole idea about making places and making information accessible to most users takes disability out of the equation. So it doesn't other people with disabilities, but it becomes really, I think, an inclusive way of being. And I think that is what society is trying to work towards, so that society, because society is the argument that society disables people. That if you design in such a way that it's accessible to all, then it's accessible. Because you are in a wheelchair, so the building's accessible, you use the building. Services are such that it's just that you have an option of services and not services for disabled people. And I think it's something that we strive towards is, making everything universally accessible. My question on that is it an ideal, or is it an argument? Is it idealistic? Is it realistic? What's reasonable? It's like the BMW example is of, more expensive or less expensive. Do it in the beginning, start it like it should be. It doesn't have to be more expensive. It's just
Exactly.
like designed
Or lay down the foundation of empowerment such that people at the end of the day can exercise their own choices. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm going to get old and not be in a position of pushing this wheelchair. What then do I do? Do I wait for society to give me an electric wheelchair, or use the best of my empowerment possibilities to find myself one? I mean, at the end of the day, you should be very careful to approach situations as though people are completely helpless. The worst that you can ever do to any sector of a population is to define them as helpless and to start asking questions that almost, how can I put this, that almost paints a picture of a people at a corner awaiting their messiah. And those are not people that I've met and interacted with in the 21 years in this wheelchair. I'm talking about capable people who just need an open door. And an open door then would be what you're talking about, universal accessibility. Access to information about where to go to find what. Because let's just be honest, today in South Africa, ladies and gentlemen, everything for a person with a disability is there or can be made possible. The problem is we just have not established a system that allows people with disabilities to know exactly where what is. Or maybe people with disabilities have also not moved towards really getting to know where what is for their own betterment. Fact. And I'm not saying it because I seem to be living in some golden castle of opportunity and possibility. Christ knows, I've also built those steps towards that castle.
Who's your role models and people that you aspire to?
Teddy Pendergrass, I said to you right from the beginning, Teddy Pendergrass, Teddy Pendergrass, Ray Charles, Andrea Bocelli. I think you're going to be my role model too. I love your shoes. It's anything positive. When it comes to people with disabilities, it's those that live beyond the, I'm sorry to use this ugly terminology, those that live beyond petty issues. And I'm not saying everything that people aspire or start fighting for is petty, but other people can be literally imprisoned in the political storms and not even find a way through. Those are not my role models, especially because I know of a child born by people with disabilities who today is a doctor. And it did not only come out of that child wanting to be a doctor, but it also came from the inspiration of the same parents who are known to be disabled, who did not only inspire by words, but went out to find opportunities to make it happen that their child became what they wanted the child to be or what the child wanted to be. I honestly am not for people that are always complaining. Quite frankly, one of the reasons why I do not belong to organizations, and not only organizations for people with disabilities, including political formations, is because people spend a lot of time just complaining about issues instead of literally just rising above the collective and at sometimes becoming an individual that just breaks down through all barriers. Fact.
I want to go back to the previous remarks. Both Simon and Marsha's question. I buy that, and I mean it's great, and I, in terms of my own understanding of life, I agree. But at universities currently, we know that the younger generation really do not always see things in the same way that we do. So our understanding that everything is indeed better, or that things, progress faster than we think, just isn't always bought by younger people. Their understanding of how things are. How would you respond to a younger South African who would say that it is absolutely nonsense to say that everything is there for disabled South Africans and that everything has changed for the better? He says it's just not true.
I don't even think I would want to entertain that question. I would most probably want to move to the next one that sees me towards the positive. You cannot have a South African today that thinks that things are not there, unless that South African is living in denial.
Yes, but surely you must acknowledge that our understanding of how things were in the 90s, the 80s and the 90s, and the type of progression that we've seen must be very different from someone born in 1996, 1997, as we are on campus now, with a totally different understanding of where South Africa comes from.
No, sir, sometimes you need to take facts and lay them on the table. What is the difference between the previous generation and the generation of today? The previous generation had to fight for everything. The generation of today is living in times where consciousness is such that people know of their rights, people have fought for their rights, and things have come to be. But unfortunately, the present generation is also very entitled. People are entitled when, let me tell you what makes people entitled. And it's true. People will be entitled if things are available. No one can ever be entitled in an empty vacuum. That's exactly how I would answer the child. Your feelings of entitlement is because you know things are available. And you take them for granted such that because they are available, you can easily close your eyes and say they are not available.
Thank you. I'm afraid if we try that, protests and burning might be on the rise.
They are always going to be banning something, but fact remains. They are living in a much better society than yesterday, and they'd better get that through their heads, or continue banning some more. And you will forgive me. I can be very brash. I know that for sure. Maybe it's because I come from a time where there was nothing, and there's definitely a lot that is around these days. And I'm not going to be entertaining anyone that comes through and says there's nothing. I mean, do you know that these kids are growing up at a time where government is giving them houses for free in the name of reconstruction and development? They're living in an era where there is what is NEFSAS?
Yes, NEFSAS.
NEFSAS or NESFAS,
Yes.
whatever, but it's a bursary. They are given bursaries. We lived in times where NGOs would go out looking for funds just to educate a child in a community. Today they have a government that gives them bursaries to go to. They have cell phones. For goodness sake, even if they do not have airtime, they can press, please call me. Everything is there. And what do? We try to be academic about it, opportunities and all of that, backgrounds. Then we go back to the DIS, disadvantaged, previously disadvantaged, disenfranchised, disempowered. Let me tell you something, sir. You can go to hell and back. South Africa has changed, and South Africa has presented opportunities to her citizenry. How we take those opportunities and what we do with them is entirely up to us. And this applies to people with disabilities too. But unfortunately, we're governed by a government that is very bad at communicating. The government's communication is the worst disaster of all times. There's so much that this government has done, particularly for people with disabilities, food, but it's not properly communicated. And if you care to check what I'm talking about, go and find out how many people with disabilities have access to education today versus in 1994. How many people with disabilities today have wheelchairs? South Africa does not have the situation that you see in other African countries where on grant payment day a person with a disability is wheelbarrowed to the pension checkpoint. They have wheelchairs. On top of that, they have free health care, are given RDPs, which we just need to go back and check if they are universally accessible. At least it's a roof over your head. What we need to do, as you rightfully said, is to check if we can go back to their design to make it a point that it's accessible. But at least it's there. A basic need that we call shelter.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Fanele Sibongi.
Yes, Fanele.
I recently had to study a court case a few weeks ago because I'm a law student, and it was a constitutional court case, and the judge said something which really struck me, and we had like a long debate with my professor about this, and because it really didn't sit well with me. He made reference to providing reasonable accommodation for minority groups, so for people with disabilities and for other minority groups, and the whole idea of reasonable accommodation, what really troubled me in the sense that, it's almost like we're saying that we have this norm and we have this society where this is what is accepted, but we can provide accommodation for what's reasonable and for people with disabilities, thus leading to this whole notion of othering and almost saying, no, this is a society for able-bodied people, but then anyone with disabilities, we make room for you. So I found that very problematic in the sense that now, if that notion is held by such a higher power in the country, and filters down to legislation, to all those things. My question to you now is, what has been your greatest challenge in overcoming, that mentality, because it's a mentality that is had by many people. If we look at, certain things that happen in our country, it's a mentality which we have.
Before you even go too far, could you do me this favor? Make it a point that you live through life without being too sensitive to a point of obscuring your mind to reality. What is reasonable accommodation? Let me ask you that question first. In as far as a person with a disability is concerned, what is reasonable accommodation? Let me try and answer that one. If you employ Musa in a wheelchair and you give me this space, but my toilet is not accessible, where do you expect I'm going to go to relieve myself when nature calls? Reasonable accommodation says the place should be accessible and its facilities such that I can use them without any problems. Am I okay, lab? If you decide tomorrow, well, Musa, you are doing very well here, I'm promoting you to upstairs. Reasonable accommodation says I cannot climb the steps. I will need a lift to take me up there. Now, if you get sensitive when people are talking about reasonable accommodation, I don't understand that. Affirmative action is also, in many ways, a form of reasonable accommodation. What are you saying with affirmative action? You are saying here is a child with potential, not even with potential, with merit. Forget about potential. Sometimes people overuse potential. Merit. Because people that should be affirmed, what you affirm is not potential, it's merit, possibility, capability. That's reasonable accommodation. You are being reasonable and accommodating the fact that here is this person of merit who comes from a background that has not enabled them to come through the door. So you say, out of 10 people that I'm going to employ here, I'm going to be reasonable and say 5 should be from areas where their merit has never been affirmed, and I'm going to get them here. That's reasonable accommodation. Now, if you tell me that you had a heated argument with your professor because a learned judge said reasonable accommodation should always be the cornerstone of empowerment, particularly to the previously disenfranchised and the disabled, why, son, you better go back to your professor and sit him down to say, explain to me more, sir. I think I was belting at a tangent.
I think of again that notion of universal access, and where there is no universal access, you need to apply the principle of reasonable accommodation. So that from a legal perspective, so now you're looking at it from a legal. I mean, ideally you would want the place to be accessible, but where that is not the case. And I mean, one looks at Stellenbosch, for example, many buildings were built, way back in the 80s before we even thought that disabled people could actually be around, that's what people thought. So in those cases, you need to then at least, because you can't rebuild the building, but at least look at how you can make it.
But even if you take it towards a legal perspective, I think the young man became so emotional to a point of not wanting to define things broadly. Employment equity, the Employment Equity Act, which is a law, if you want to call it that, is reasonable accommodation. Gender equity. All of those can be defined broader as part of society's attempts towards reasonable accommodation.
So we're trying to be, but ultimately that's not. Ultimately, you want to be in an environment that's accessible to all. Ultimately, but it's like this is an interim phase almost where you need to do things because the playing fields are not balanced, so you need to put some steps and measures in place.
Would you please share with us some of the awards that you have accumulated in your life?
The awards that I've accumulated in life, the greatest one is being a father. Yeah. Being a father. That's when life says to you, stereotypes can never really determine human nature. People with disabilities are almost defined as asexual. And some of them even lock themselves in that stereotype and cannot even start establishing relationships with the other party. But when I was blessed with my children, I think that's the award that I'm just wanting to talk about here today. The rest are because of the work that I do, and you will find them in my profile. Yeah. But the greatest one that I would really just love to put up there is what life gave to me, fatherhood. Yeah.
So how many children?
3.
3.
But again, God being the mighty God that He is, our third one was born on the 8th of March 2013. But God decided, Musa, I think I've given you too much, and recalled the very same afternoon. Yeah.
So what is it that you still hope to achieve in your life that you haven't yet achieved? Because you've written books, you are a poet, you deliver talks, motivational talks, you've achieved many things that an average person wouldn't necessarily achieve.
I think it's to be the best in what I do and to improve with time and adapt it through the ages such that it still makes a lot of sense. I think that's what I would just love to see happening now. I'm not sure if there are new things that I still want to do. I'd love to go bungee jumping, but they say it can be very dangerous, especially when you are paraplegic. I also would love to go skydiving. I think, let me tell you the truth, life has blessed me with so much, especially because I live at a level of my passions. I wake up every day to exercise my passions. I just hope that with time, my passions could find me the best of me. Yeah.
Be the best at what you do.
Yeah, to be the best at what I do, what I say, what I draw, what I think about, how I articulate it. I also would love to see in the Zulu Trust literally becoming an institution of hope, particularly for a child that thinks it's not possible. Because the fact is it's possible. With opportunity, everything is possible. I also would love to see tributes honoring more women with disabilities, because those 3 days that we stay with these women are magical. That's why you discover that there's so much you do not know. People have their own individual approach to life, which when you sit down to be a part of, as they share their experiences with you, you learn so much. So I'm hoping that there is never going to be a year where I'm not going to have enough funding to stage a tribute event. Because it's a wonderful opportunity to meet other people that think the same.
There has been some complaints from people sometimes when they are watching television movies that talks about people who had disability, like a movie, Ray Charles movie, and so on. So some people are of the idea that those roles should be played by people who has that disability rather than.
How many people that are blind can play Ray Charles? Honestly, find me a blind person that can play Ray Charles better than who is this boy? Oh, please, come on. Come on. It's the same as these people that say, how can Mandela be played by Idris Abba? Who can play him better than him? What is a movie all about? A movie is not about nursing a situation or stroking people's egos. If you can't act Ray Charles and you are blind, leave it alone to people that can play, number one, role play a blind person, and number two, Ray Charles. How many people? Oh, what? Honestly, if tomorrow I were lucky and somebody needed to make a movie out of my life, do you think I will just give it to any person because they are rolling on wheels? And maybe they don't even look like me. Come on, honestly, don't do this to me.
Yeah, so
and it's just not an issue. Any South African actor that starts making noise about a South African icon being played by an American, just go home, sit down, watch that movie, and see art in motion. And that's exactly what movies are all about, son. They are art in motion. And we're not just going to be taking any figurehead here and putting them there. Before you know it, it's going to be art in slow motion. No. No.
Okay. I think we can conclude now. I really like this quote that you have. It says, when the burning flame of spirit is ignited, it will transform any soul, no matter what the circumstances. It's one of the quotes that Mr. Zulu uses. I would like to thank everyone for coming out this afternoon, and I'd like to thank mostly Mr. Zulu for gracing us with his presence. We have a small token of appreciation to Mr. Zulu. It's a certificate from our institute. You are now an officially honorary member of our institute.
Oh my God. Wait, thank you very much. You know, there's something else that I wanted to tell you in my introduction, which made me, when you phoned me to invite me here, feel so honored. In 2014, my book, The Language of Me, was celebrating 10 years. So I sat down with the publishers and my team at Valhalla Arts to give it a new look. We then went to the internet just to check if there were any reviews that had been done on the book, to take them and make them a part of the 10th anniversary copy of The Language of Me. And I was blown away to find out that Ken Junior Lipenga submitted a PhD thesis dissertation on narrative enabling expressions. Narrative, I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
But what this guy is doing, he is taking books, films, and other texts by people with disabilities and analyzing them as expressions that enable them to reach out and be known exactly who they are and the type of a society they are living in. And one of the books that he sampled was my book, The Language of Me. Now I have a certificate from Stellenbosch, and I have a PhD thesis written and my book sampled for that one. Thank you very much to all of you.